You get out of an Uber, the door shuts, the Uber pulls away, and nothing happened. No cash, no wallet, no card, nobody stopped you for one last confirmation. Yet you paid. That part is already done, settled somewhere behind the glass of your phone while you were still reaching for the door handle. The final charge slips into a notification you may never open, not because the number is hidden, because the decision was already made, and getting out of the car doesn't reopen it. There's nothing left to agree to. That's the texture of the whole modern day. You hold your phone to a turnstile and the city lets you through. A payment is collected at 2 in the morning for something you signed up for once and forgot, while you sleep straight through it. 3 payments. Not a single moment of paying. The final form is already in front of you. The real question is what had to disappear to make it possible, how paying reached a point where the act itself could simply dissolve into the background of your life, because the pieces were nearly all in place. Future income was already spendable. You could buy against money you hadn't earned. A single sale could already become a relationship that never ended, a charge that arrived every month on its own. The one thing still standing in the way was the payment moment itself, the small pause where money visibly left your hands. Remove that pause, and both systems became quieter, easier to spread, and far harder to interrupt. So start with the pause. Start with the thing that used to make you feel it. Cash makes the loss difficult to ignore. You see it, you count it, you feel the fold of it go thin between your fingers, and you hand it across and watch it leave. And in that handover, there is a flicker, one last instant where you can still change your mind. Cash asks you a question on its way out the door. Are you sure? A card lets the answer wait. The thing is yours now, today, with nothing in the way. The cost shows up weeks later, gathered with a dozen other small yeses into a single line at the bottom of a statement, where no purchase ever has to stand alone and meet your eye. The pleasure is yours in the present. The weight belongs to some later version of you, and that version isn't in the room when you decide. People aren't fools about this. Plenty clear the balance every month. But in some experiments, changing nothing but the payment method was enough to make buyers bid higher for the very same thing. Same object, same person. All that moved was how much it seemed to cost them. And then the card did something stranger than softening the loss. It dressed the loss up as a reward. Points, miles, cashback. The money walks out of your account, and the screen turns around to tell you that you've earned something. Spending stops feeling like losing. It starts to feel like progress. Like every purchase is quietly carrying you forward instead of leaving you with less. But before a card could do any of that, it had to escape the dining rooms of the rich and find its way into ordinary homes. The industry preferred an elegant beginning. A businessman finishes dinner, reaches for his wallet, and finds he's left it at home. And from that small embarrassment, the story goes, a new kind of card is born. The precise details have been smoothed over the years into something close to legend, and the truth underneath them is hazy. But the card it gave us, Diners Club, removed cash from the table without changing much else. It was still a charge card, used for travel and restaurants and business lunches, with the balance expected in full at the end of the month. Convenient, but contained. A card for people who already had money. The mass market revolution arrived 8 years later. It didn't come from a restaurant. It came in the mail. One morning in 1958, ordinary people in Fresno, California, opened their mailboxes and found a working BankAmericard with their name already on it. No application, no request. It was simply there, switched on, carrying a few $100s of credit, about $500 in most accounts, ready to spend that afternoon. And the bank had spent weeks beforehand quietly signing up the shops around town, so that the moment the cards landed, there was already somewhere to use them. Then it came apart. Cards were stolen out of mailboxes, fraud spread, balances went unpaid, and the bank lost a fortune in a hurry. By every ordinary measure, it was a disaster, and the bank pressed on anyway. The launch failed operationally. The idea succeeded commercially. Because Fresno had shown something the bank could not unlearn, revolving credit could be placed inside ordinary households at mass scale, with a network of merchants ready and waiting to accept it. And revolving credit was the quiet heart of it. This card didn't expect to be paid off at the end of the month. You could buy today and let the bill arrive later. And even when it arrived, you didn't have to clear it. You could pay a sliver, push the rest into next month, and keep spending on top of it. A purchase used to end when you paid for it. Now it didn't have to end at all. From there, the act of paying just kept getting smaller. Cash was counted by hand. The first cards were pressed into carbon paper and signed. Then the magnetic stripe allowed the card's details to be read electronically in a single swipe. The swipe became a tap you barely glance at. The card melted into a phone, and then the gesture vanished completely because the details were already saved, waiting, somewhere out of sight. Each stage asked a little less of you, less time, less attention, less of that flicker where you might stop and reconsider. Eventually, the card reached a form in which it no longer needed to appear. You enter it once. After that, the payment credential simply lives in the background, and the charges happen on their own. You don't approve them one by one. You don't see most of them coming. Carrying on costs you nothing, because carrying on is the default now. It's stopping that takes the effort, hunting down the right page, and sometimes clicking through screens designed to slow you down. The money moves while you sleep, and the subscription you half forgot never has to win you back because it never let go in the first place. You said yes once. The system kept hearing yes, long after you stopped listening for it. Direct debit and other systems can do the same, but stored card payments helped make that invisible permission ordinary across digital commerce. And now the three stories become one. Future income became spendable. Payment relationships became continuous. None of that was invented by invisible payment. The borrowing and the subscriptions came first and stood on their own. But once the payment moment could disappear, both of them changed character. They grew quieter, easier to scale, far harder to interrupt. The money you hadn't earned and the relationship that never ended could now run on, month after month, without forcing a fresh decision every time. None of this makes the card a villain. It expanded commerce, made travel easier, put short-term credit and purchasing power within reach when people needed them, turned the online world into somewhere you could buy from, and made many of the services you rely on possible in the first place. Those benefits are real, and they deserve to be stated plainly. But look at the trade. The cost went quiet at the exact moment you chose to spend. Buying and paying drifted apart in time. Rewards made loss look like progress. A single yes could be stored and reused. Continuing became effortless. Stopping became the only part that demanded anything from you. The card began as a way to pay without cash. It ended as a way to pay without noticing.